The moon hung thin and sharp over Papiri that night, a pale blade cutting through restless clouds. Its dim silver glow washed over the northern plains, mixing with the dust carried by the dry Harmattan winds. The air felt too cold for the season, cold not because of the weather, but because some unseen shadow seemed to settle over the land, pressing down on the villagers' chests like a hand. At the edge of the settlement stood Street Maria's school, a modest compound of tin roofs and open hallways. During the day, it rang with the voices of hundreds of children. But tonight, it lay quiet, its classrooms shuttered, its courtyards empty. A few dim lanterns flickered outside the dormitories, swaying in the wind as if recognizing an intruder approaching from far off. Inside, nearly 600 students slept in rows of bunk beds, stacked close like shelves of fragile hope. Their breathing rose and fell like a soft tide. None of them knew that the clock had already struck the hour that would divide their lives in two before the night and after it. Somewhere beyond the outer fence, a piece of metal clinked against stone. Then another. Then footfalls heavy, deliberate, and too many to be mistaken for animals. The darkness seemed to thicken around them, swallowing the lantern light. It began. Amaka pressed her ear against the wooden door of the girls' dormitory, squinting into the dimness. The hallway lantern outside wavered uneasily, casting long shadows across the floor. She could not shake the feeling that something was moving in the courtyard, something large, silent, and very much human. She was only 12, with slender wrists and bright observant eyes, but tonight she felt older. She felt responsible. The other girls lay beside her on the bunks, some asleep, some pretending to sleep, their thin blankets pulled up to their chins like a shield against whatever hunted in the dark. A stone struck a window frame. A muffled shout followed. Suddenly, chaos tore through the silence. Dogs barking wildly, a teacher screaming, the sharp crack of wood splintering as doors were kicked open. Shadows surged, figures clothed in black, faces wrapped, rifles slung across their chests. The extremists had come. Boots pounded the ground as they flooded the courtyard like a dark tide swallowing the school. Their voices, harsh, foreign, commanding, echoed against the walls. Some spoke Hausa, some Kanuri, some a dialect Amaka didn't recognize. She didn't need to understand the words. Their intent was clear. A man slammed the door open so hard it banged against the wall. "Out! Move!" The girls screamed. Some clung to their bunks, others froze. One of the intruders fired a warning shot into the ceiling, filling the room with dust and terror. Amaka's heart hammered so wildly she thought it might burst through her ribs. One of the men grabbed her wrist and yanked her from the bed. Her bare feet scraped the cold floor. He reached down, pulled off her shoes, her worn blue canvas shoes with the frayed tips, and tossed them aside like useless trash. The sight of her shoes lying abandoned on the floor felt strangely like the last piece of her childhood being ripped away. She wasn't alone. All around her, shoes scattered, pink sandals, little black school shoes, plastic slippers like a garden of tiny footprints that would never be completed. Outside, dozens of children were herded into lines, their cries swallowed by the roar of engines as several trucks rolled forward from behind the school. Men with rifles barked orders. Teachers were beaten and forced to the ground. A few older boys tried to run but were dragged back, kicking and screaming. Amaka shivered violently as she was shoved toward the truck bed. A girl beside her whispered, "Please, please, don't kill us," before breaking into sobs. Another muttered prayers under her breath, the words tumbling frantically like stones down a hill. The men did not care. They hoisted the children onto the truck like sacks of grain. A gunman grabbed Amaka under the arms and threw her upward. She landed painfully among dozens of trembling bodies. Someone's elbow jabbed her ribs. Another child clung to her shirt. The truck engines roared to life. As the convoy lurched forward, Amaka twisted to get one last look at Street Maria's school. Through the blur of tears, she saw the courtyard lanterns flickering in the wind, casting light over the hundreds of shoes scattered across the dirt, small, colorful, abandoned. It was a graveyard of innocence, and it was the last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed the convoy whole. The road jolted beneath them. Dust filled the air. A baby in the back cried. Then another. One of the boys began to scream for his mother until a guard smacked him silent. Amaka bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. She tried to pray, but her voice wouldn't come. She tried to breathe, but her chest refused. All she had left was the memory of her grandmother's voice, whispering a prayer every night before bed. Child, when fear comes, hold on to your faith. Even the smallest light destroys darkness. But there was no light here. Only the shaking of the truck, the shaking of her hands, and the shaking of a moon that refused to shine. Hours later, the convoy disappeared into the thick Nigerian forest, leaving behind only the echo of screams and a field of tiny shoes scattered like stars fallen from the sky. The night settled over the Sambisa outskirts like a heavy curtain, swallowing every remaining fragment of daylight. Deep inside the forest, where the moonlight barely pierced through the thick canopy, the children were herded like frightened animals. Their wrists were bound with coarse ropes, some still trembling from exhaustion, others silently crying, their faces streaked with dust and fear. Aisha stumbled as she was shoved forward again. Her legs were shaking so violently she almost fell, but Musa caught her arm just in time. His grip was firm, far firmer than a 12-year-old should need to be. "Keep walking," he whispered. "If we fall behind, they'll hit us." About ahead of them, the militants barked orders in harsh voices, their rifles slung across their backs or pointed at the terrified line of children. Some sang war chants under their breath. Others muttered impatiently, but all of them carried the same coldness in their eyes, the kind that made the children avoid looking at them for more than a second. Aisha's heart pounded in her chest. "Mama, Baba, are you alive? Are you looking for me? Did the soldiers find our village?" Every thought came with a sting of panic. When the group finally reached a small clearing, the militants ordered everyone to sit. A few of the younger kids, too confused to obey immediately, were threatened with rifle butts until they scrambled into place. The leader, a tall man with a black scarf covering his face, raised his hand. His presence was frightening even in silence. The children whispered that he was called Gado, a name spoken with dread across several villages. Rumor said he had overseen kidnappings before, that he was responsible for dozens of missing children. Rumor, and now reality. "Listen," Gado began, his voice low but commanding. "You will follow our rules, and you will not try to escape. Do as you are told, and you will live. Resist." He paused, letting the threat linger in the humid air. "And you won't." A whimper rose somewhere among the children, quickly silenced by a rough hand. Aisha lowered her eyes. She remembered the catechist at church once telling them that evil often masqueraded as strength, but she had never felt the weight of that truth until now. When the militants dispersed to prepare food and set up their temporary camp, the children huddled together, exhausted and terrified. Night insects buzzed around them, filling the silence with an eerie drone. Musa leaned close to Aisha. "Do you think anyone knows where they took us?" Aisha swallowed hard. "My mother will never stop searching. She'll tell the priest. The priest will tell everyone. They'll pray." "And soldiers?" Musa asked hopefully. Aisha hesitated. The last she saw of her village, flames had lit up the sky, and the sound of gunfire echoed like thunder. She didn't know if soldiers would come. She didn't even know if her parents survived. "I don't know," she finally whispered. But as the night deepened, a strange stillness settled over her heart, something she didn't understand. Fear still clung to her, but underneath it, like a gentle current below a storm, there was something else. A softness, a warmth, a whisper that wasn't heard with the ears, but felt inside. She brushed the thought away. "I'm just scared. That's all." Around midnight, the militants forced the children into a canvas tent large enough to hold them, but cramped and suffocating. Aisha found herself sitting between Musa and a girl named Chidinma, who couldn't stop shaking. "I want to go home." Chidinma sobbed softly into her palms. Aisha put a trembling arm around her. "We will, I promise," but her voice cracked at the end of the sentence. Outside, the forest continued its unsettling symphony crickets, distant howls, and the occasional angry shout from one of the guards. The temperature dropped, and cold wind swept intermittently through the gaps of the tent, making the children curl up tighter. Minutes passed. Then hours. Sleep came to some only because exhaustion forced it. But Aisha stayed awake, struggling to keep her breathing steady. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment her classroom was stormed. The yelling, the shots fired into the ceiling, the children dragged out by force. Her throat tightened. She couldn't cry anymore. She had no tears left. But then, something changed. It began subtly, like a faint glow behind her eyelids. Not a real light if she opened her eyes again. The tent was pitch black, but an inner brightness she couldn't explain. She suddenly felt less cold, almost as if someone had draped a warm shawl over her shoulders. Aisha's breath caught. She sat up slowly. Chidinma stirred beside her. "What's wrong?" Aisha shook her head. I don't know." She looked around. The children who were still awake were too frightened to notice anything unusual. The one sleeping tossed uneasily, lost in nightmares. But Aisha felt something else, something the others didn't seem to feel. A presence, gentle, motherly, deeply familiar. A presence that brought with it a comfort she had felt only in church, kneeling before the small statue of the Virgin Mary beside her mother every Sunday. Aisha clutched the wooden rosary hidden under her shirt. She whispered a single Hail Mary, her voice barely audible, and then the warmth intensified like sunlight breaking through clouds. Hours later, long after the camp had grown quiet and the militants had fallen asleep around their fires, Aisha woke again, this time from a dream so vivid it left her breathless. She had seen a woman, dressed in flowing light, radiant, yet gentle, a woman whose eyes held more compassion than she had ever known in her life. The woman reached out a hand, not touching, merely stretching it forward as though inviting Aisha to rise. And then she spoke, though her lips never moved. "Do not be afraid, child." Aisha woke, with tears sliding down her cheeks. "Are you okay?" Musa whispered, seeing her expression. Aisha wiped her face with the back of her hand. I saw her." "Who?" A nervous swallow. "Our mother." Musa blinked in confusion. "Your mother? Or—" "No," Aisha whispered, voice trembling. "The mother." Understanding dawned slowly in his eyes. But before he could respond, something happened outside the tent. Something that made both of them freeze. A rustle in the bushes. Then silence. Then a soft blue glow. It seeped through the fabric of the tent, faint but unmistakable, like moonlight intensified 100 times. The light danced softly, illuminating the shadows. The militant guarding the tent suddenly jolted awake, glancing around nervously. "Who's there?" he barked. The light pulsed. The guard cursed and gripped his rifle tighter. But the forest remained utterly silent. No animal, no intruder, only the strange, holy glow. Inside the tent, dozens of children had woken up, whispering in fear. Chidinma clutched Aisha's arm, so hard it hurt. "What is that?" she whimpered. Aisha didn't know how to answer, because while the others trembled, she felt her heart expand with something she hadn't felt since the attack began. Hope, soft as a whisper, steady as a heartbeat, warm as the arms of a mother. She didn't understand how she knew, or why she was certain, but she whispered anyway. "She's here," he admonished. And for the first time, since the nightmare began, Aisha believed they would live.
The blue glow didn't fade. If anything, it grew brighter, soft at first, like moonshine caught in morning mist, then slowly pulsing with a warmth that didn't belong in the cold Nigerian night. The children stared, their fear momentarily forgotten. Outside, the guard stood frozen. His rifle trembled in his hands. A second guard, awakened by the light, ran toward him. "What's happening? Did someone get inside?" "I don't know," the first stammered. "Maybe it's a drone, maybe soldiers, maybe." His voice died when the glow intensified again. "This isn't natural." The word hung in the humid air. Natural? No, it wasn't. Inside the tent, Aisha found herself rising to her knees. Her legs still shook from exhaustion, but her heart felt steady, stronger than it had been since the nightmare began. Every part of her knew, without understanding why, that the light wasn't here to hurt them. Chidinma whispered, "Aisha, don't go near it." But Aisha wasn't moving toward the tent opening. She was simply sitting upright, eyes locked on the shimmering fabric. Musa leaned closer. "Do you really think she's here?" Aisha nodded. "I don't think. I feel it." A breath shuddered from her lips, not from fear but from something deeper, an awe she didn't know she could feel in a place like this. "Look," Aisha whispered. The children turned to the front of the tent. The glow intensified until the canvas no longer hid anything. Every crease, every stitch was illuminated as if daylight had returned. For a heartbeat, the children thought the tent would catch fire from the brightness, but the canvas never warmed. Instead, a silhouette appeared, the shape of a woman. No face, no features, just a radiant outline, luminous, gentle, unmistakable. Some of the children gasped. Others collapsed into sobs. Chidinma covered her mouth. Is that?" Aisha didn't answer. Her lips moved silently through a prayer she barely remembered learning. Hail Mary, full of grace. Outside, the militants were in chaos. "What kind of magic is this?" one shouted. "Turn off the lights." "We don't have lights, idiot." "Then where is it coming from?" Some ran for their weapons. Others backed away, refusing to get any closer. Even Gado, the feared leader, hesitated as he stepped into the clearing. He looked up at the glowing tent with narrowed, unsettled eyes. "Check the tent," he ordered. A guard took a step forward, then stopped. I can't," he whispered. Gado grabbed him by the collar. "Are you afraid of light?" The guard's voice cracked. "That's no ordinary light." Another pointed at the trees. "It's not spreading, it's only around the children's tent." Gado clicked his tongue but said nothing. He could feel it too. Something otherworldly. The silhouette grew clearer. The children stared, too stunned to move, too overwhelmed to speak. The shape of the woman was like pure warmth given form, like every comforting memory of motherly love woven into a single figure. Then the voice came, not from her lips, not through the air. It bloomed inside their hearts. "Do not be afraid." The children gasped. Several fell to their knees. Aisha felt tears spill down her face, not of fear, but of release, as if every tight knot of terror inside her was slowly loosening. The voice continued, gentle as a lullaby. "I am with you," Chidinma whispered. "Aisha, I feel it too. I feel her." Musa wiped his eyes angrily, embarrassed by his emotions. "Why would she come here?" "To us?" Aisha whispered. "Because we called for her, and because we need her." The light flared brighter. For a moment, the children thought they saw her face, beautiful, sorrowful, radiant with compassion, the kind of beauty that didn't blind but healed. And the woman lifted her hand. The ropes around the children's wrists loosened, then untied, then fell away completely. Gasps filled the tent. "How?" "I didn't do anything. It just slipped off by itself." Dozens of children stared at their freed hands, unable to comprehend it. Aisha looked at her own wrists. The rope fell onto her lap like it had never been tied in the first place. "She freed us," she whispered. The silhouette stepped closer. The tent walls glowed as if the sun had risen inside. The mother's voice, so calm it made the forest seem quiet, spoke again. "Rise." Outside the tent, fear turned into panic. "The ropes," one guard cried. "They're falling off." "How do you know?" "I tied some of those kids myself. Those knots don't loosen unless you cut them." Another militant whispered. "This is a sign. We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have taken them." Gado snarled. "Fools. It's a trick of the mind. Light can confuse you. Fear can make you see visions." But even as he spoke, his voice trembled. Deep inside, he understood something he refused to admit. This was no trick. This was something greater, something he had no power over. Inside, the children rose slowly, trembling in awe. The silhouette lifted her hand again. The tent opening, secured from the outside, fluttered as if pulled by gentle hands. Then it fell open. A cold breeze rushed inside, carrying the scent of the night forest. Aisha looked at the opening, at the trees, at freedom. "But the guards," Musa whispered. "They will shoot us." Aisha turned toward the woman of light. The virgin, still wordless, extended her hand toward the forest path. "Go." The words settled into every heart. Not loud, not urgent, just certain. Aisha took a step forward. Her feet no longer felt heavy. Her fear no longer screamed inside her. She wasn't walking alone. Dozens of children followed her quietly, clutching each other, eyes still full of tears. When they crossed the threshold of the tent, something extraordinary happened. The guards didn't move, not even when the children walked right past them. One guard tried to lift his weapon, but his arms hung limp, as though invisible hands held them still. Another tried to shout, but no sound came out. Gado watched in horror as the children passed him, one by one, untouched, unchallenged. "What is this?" he whispered, stepping backward. He looked to the tent glowing still, and finally he felt fear, real fear. Not of soldiers, not of failure, but of something holy, something he could not fight. The forest should have been pitch black. Instead, a faint, silvery trail illuminated itself on the ground, just enough for the children to see where to step, but dim enough not to alert distant patrols. The children followed it in silence. Aisha turned once, looking behind her. The tent still glowed. The silhouette of the Virgin Mary stood at its entrance like a guardian. When their eyes met, if such a thing was even possible, a flood of warmth filled Aisha's chest, and then the figure slowly faded. The light dimmed, the tent grew dark again, and the forest returned to its night silence. But the children's hearts were changed forever. For the first time since the nightmare began, they were not afraid of the dark, because they knew. She had walked into it with them, and she would lead them home. The forest was no longer quiet. The moment the last child disappeared into the darkness, the paralysis that had gripped the militants broke. At first it was subtle, a twitch in a finger, a blink, a gasp. Then, almost all at once, the men staggered back into motion, stumbling as though released from invisible chains. Gado felt his lungs seize before he drew in a sharp breath. Rage, humiliation, and terror collided violently inside him. "Wake up!" he shouted, shaking one of his men by the shoulder. "They're gone! The children gone!" The guard blinked, bewildered. "How? How did they? Does it matter? Move!" Within seconds, the entire camp erupted into frantic activity. Rifles loaded, flashlights flicked on, boots pounding the soil. But the lights shook in their hands. Even the toughest among them could not deny the truth. Something unnatural had touched the camp. Something had walked among them, and they had been helpless. Gado clenched his jaw. "Fan out! Find them before they reach the road." The men obeyed, but their eyes darted nervously toward the trees, where the strange glow had vanished only minutes before. Far ahead, the children pushed through the underbrush, following the last faint trace of that silvery path. It shimmered like moonlight spilled onto the earth, barely enough to see by, but unmistakable. "Stay together," Aisha whispered urgently. "Don't let go of anyone." Some of the youngest children were carried by older ones, their sobs muffled against shoulders. Musa took the rear, checking constantly for movement behind them. "But the light," Chidinma said breathlessly beside Aisha. "It's fading, Aisha. What do we do when it disappears?" Aisha swallowed. She didn't know. Already, the glowing trail was thinning, as though whatever force created it was weakening. "We keep walking," she said softly. "She brought us this far. She won't leave us now." But doubt tugged at her chest. The night was vast, the forest dangerous, and behind them, the militants were beginning their pursuit. A distant shout made several children flinch. "They're coming!" someone cried. The group quickened its pace, branches slapping their arms and legs. The last thin threads of moonlit path flickered, then vanished altogether. Darkness swallowed them. "Stop," Aisha whispered. "No running, we'll get lost." The children huddled close, shivering as the sounds of the forest grew louder, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of an animal, and behind it all, footsteps, closing in. Musa grabbed Aisha's arm, whispering urgently, "Listen." Through the trees they heard men's voices, angry, confused, desperate. "Spread out. They can't have gone far. Watch the ground. Look for tracks." But then, a strange thing happened. A mist began to roll through the forest floor, thin at first, then thicker, until it curled around the trees like pale smoke. It carried a coolness with it, unlike the heavy, humid air of the Nigerian night. It wrapped around the children, surrounding them in a veil of soft white. Chidinma gasped. "Where is it coming from?" Aisha didn't answer. She felt her heart slowing, her panic easing. The mist wasn't frightening. It felt like the touch of a soft hand on her cheek, like a mother calming her child. "It's her," Aisha whispered. Musa opened his mouth to question her, but then he saw it too. Silhouettes flickered in the mist. Not clear, not solid, just the impression of a woman's presence near the edges of their vision. Whenever he tried to focus on her, she dissolved again, like light passing through water. The militants, however, experienced something entirely different. From the other side of the mist, shouts erupted. "I can't see. Where are you?" "Someone's there. No. Over there." Some fired their rifles blindly. The bullets ricocheted off trees, filling the night with sharp cracks. Several men stumbled over roots or into one another. One screamed that he saw a woman floating among the trees. Another swore he heard whispering in a language he didn't understand. Chaos swallowed them. Aisha held the frightened children close. "Stay still. Don't make a sound." The mist thickened around them like a protective wall, and for several minutes, just long enough, the militants' footsteps drifted farther away. When the mist finally thinned, Aisha led the children onward. They walked until the forest suddenly opened into a wide, dark gap, a ravine carved deep into the earth. Gasps echoed through the group. "We can't cross that. It's too deep. We're trapped." The chasm stretched far in both directions. Climbing down was impossible. Jumping across was suicidal. Behind them, faint but unmistakable, came the shouts of pursuing men. "Aisha," Musa whispered, voice shaking. "This is it. They'll catch us. There's nowhere left to go." Aisha stepped to the edge, peering into the abyss. The darkness below was endless. "Please," she whispered into the night. "Mama Mary, don't leave us." Her voice broke. A single tear slid down her cheek. Then the wind shifted. Not strongly, just a soft, graceful movement of air, and the ground beneath her feet began to glow. A narrow path of pale light formed along the ravine's edge, then stretched across the gap, creating a shimmering bridge no wider than a single person. The children stared, speechless. "It's light," Musa whispered. "Will it hold?" Chidinma asked. Musa stepped forward, touching the bridge with the tip of his foot. It felt solid, like stone. "It will hold," Aisha said, voice filled with awe. "Let's go." Quickly, one by one, the children crossed, clutching each other for balance. The light under their feet pulsed gently, reassuringly. Halfway across, some began to cry not from fear, but from the overwhelming sense of being protected. Aisha waited until every last child made it to the other side. As soon as her own feet touched solid ground, the bridge flickered, then vanished. Just as the militants burst through the trees, shouts filled the air. "There they are. Stop." But when Gaddo, for the first time all night, charged ahead and reached the ravine, he froze. There was nothing he could do. The children stood safely across the gap, watching him. His face twisted, not just with rage, but with a fear he could no longer hide. What protected you?" he whispered. Aisha didn't answer. She didn't need to. The forest spoke for her. A sudden gust of wind swept the clearing, carrying with it the faint scent of roses impossible in the harsh wilderness of Sambisa. The militants staggered back, unnerved, and for the first time, Gaddo felt something he never allowed himself to feel. He was not the strongest force in this forest. Not tonight. The children continued deeper into the forest until dawn painted the sky gray. Just when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, a voice rang out. "Hold your fire, they're children!" Soldiers emerged from the trees Nigerian security forces sent after reports of an attack. Their rifles lowered instantly when they saw who stood before them. Dozens of children, dirty, exhausted, but alive. A captain knelt before them, eyes wide. "Are you the missing students?" Musa nodded weakly. Aisha couldn't speak. She was too tired, too overwhelmed. "How did you escape?" a soldier asked in disbelief. Dozens of tiny voices answered at once. "A light. A woman. She protected us. She showed us the way." But Aisha spoke last, with quiet certainty. "Our mother brought us home." The soldiers exchanged confused glances, but none challenged the children's testimony. Some things the forest no longer needed to explain. Night settled over the savannah like a heavy veil, thick with silence except for the distant chirping of insects and the faint rustle of wind through the grass. The children huddled close together beneath the twisting branches of a baobab tree, their bodies trembling from exhaustion and fear. Father Maliki knelt a few steps away, whispering prayers beneath his breath. The glow of the moon caught the edge of his rosary, casting thin silver reflections onto the dusty ground. They had traveled far farther than any of them thought their legs could carry them. Yet the militants were still searching. Every few hours, echoes of gunfire or the hum of motorcycles rippled across the landscape, reminding them that danger was never far behind. "Father," whispered Zara, the oldest girl among them, barely 14. "Where will we go now?" Father Malachi looked up at the sky, its black dome littered with stars. "Where the mother leads us," he said softly. "She has not brought us this far only to abandon us now." Some of the children nodded, comforted by his confidence. Others simply clung to one another, unsure what to believe anymore. Miracles felt too large for them to grasp, yet the memory of the luminous woman, the lady who shielded them, broke their chains and led them through impossible paths burned bright in their minds. A sudden crack in the distance made several gasp. Footsteps? Engines? Leaves shifting under weight? Father Malachi raised a hand, signaling silence. Everyone froze. A faint light flickered between the trees, a lantern swinging in the hands of someone moving purposefully. The priest's heart tightened. That was no star, no moon reflection. They were being hunted. "Down," he whispered urgently. "Stay low. Do not make a sound." The lantern light grew stronger. Voices followed, harsh, urgent, speaking Hausa mixed with Arabic phrases. The militants. They had fanned out, sweeping the wilderness in wide arcs. The children pressed against the earth, breaths shallow. Some clasped rosaries made of string and seeds, others squeezed their eyes shut. One boy began to cry silently until Zara pulled him close and covered his mouth gently. The footsteps drew nearer, closer, closer. Father Malachi braced himself. If the militants found them, he would stand first. He had already accepted that his life was no longer his own. Then, just as the lantern cast its glow across the base of the tree, something happened. The wind shifted, softly at first, then with deliberate force, a gust curled through the branches, sending leaves spinning downward like silent green snow. The lantern flickered, sputtered, and went out completely. "What?" a militant shouted. Another cursed, striking the lantern repeatedly. "The flame, why is it?" The wind roared again, stronger this time, swirling dust into a miniature storm. The militants stumbled back, covering their faces. The children, still hidden in the shadows, watched with wide eyes. Through the storm, a figure appeared. Not physical, more like a silhouette of pale light, shaped like a woman standing calmly amidst the chaos. The dust circled around her without touching her, as though obeying invisible boundaries. Father Malachi recognized her instantly. The Virgin, the Mother, the Lady of Light. She lifted her hand not in aggression, but in a soft, sorrowful gesture of protection. The militants staggered backward in fear. One dropped his rifle, another fell to his knees, convinced he had encountered a spirit of death. Their voices rose in panic. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the wind ceased. The figure faded, and darkness reclaimed the valley. The militants fled, abandoning the search. The children remained frozen in astonished silence. Finally, Father Malachi breathed out, "Thanks be to God." The children erupted into soft sobs, muffled laughter, and trembling relief. They weren't safe, not yet, but they had been spared once again. Later that night, with the threat temporarily lifted, they resumed their journey. The moon guided them along narrow footpaths carved through tall grass. Occasionally, one of the children swore they saw a faint white glow drifting ahead like a lantern made of mist guiding their steps. But whenever they tried to look directly at it, the glow disappeared. They walked for hours until the sky began to fade from black to deep blue. Dawn was approaching, staining the horizon with hints of rose and gold. Fatigue weighed heavily on the group. "We need a place to rest," Father Malachi said quietly, "but not in the open." Zara pointed ahead. "There, the rocks." A series of stone outcrops jutted from the earth like ancient sentinels. With some effort, the group climbed into a narrow crevice hidden from view. It was cramped, but it offered shade and concealment. They settled in. Father Malachi distributed the last of the cassava he had carried. The portions were tiny, but enough to keep their strength from failing entirely. "Father," whispered a small boy named Cheek, "why is the lady helping us? Who are we that heaven listens?" Malachi paused. The question was innocent but profound. "You are children of God," he said gently. "Each of you is precious, and the mother she listens most closely to the smallest, the weakest, the ones the world tries to erase." Chike blinked slowly. But what if they catch us? The priest rested a hand on his head. Then we trust. Faith is not the absence of danger, it is the courage to walk forward even when danger surrounds you. The boy nodded, half understanding but fully comforted. As sunlight crept over the savannah, the children settled into uneasy sleep. Father Malachi remained awake, watching the horizon, sensing a deeper current beneath everything that had happened. The lady had intervened 3 times now, each time strategically, each time just before disaster. This was no mere escape. Something larger was unfolding, something spiritual, something prophetic, something far beyond his understanding. He closed his eyes and prayed silently. Mother, guide us to the place you have chosen. Show me what I must do for these children. Show me how to lead them. The wind stirred faintly, brushing past him with the softness of a whisper. A voice not heard with the ears, but felt deep within, echoed through his spirit. Follow the river. He opened his eyes. There was no river nearby, but somewhere ahead, unseen, awaited the next step of their journey, the step that would bring them closer to salvation or deeper into the valley of shadows. The first heat of morning swept over the savannah as Father Malachi roused the children from their hiding place between the rocks. The sunlight shimmered on the tall grasses, making them sway like a golden sea. Despite the exhaustion etched on every child's face, there was also a growing sense of anticipation, an almost instinctive understanding that something significant awaited them ahead. Stay close, Father Malachi whispered, and keep your voices low. Their path turned north, weaving through shrubs and slopes of thorny acacia trees. The priest did not know exactly where the river lay, but he trusted the whisper he had heard. He had learned something in the last day when the mother spoke. Even in silence, the soul understood. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, hitting them with waves of heat. The smallest children stumbled frequently, and the older ones took turns carrying them. Yet no one complained. It was as though an invisible hand steadied them. But by midday, danger returned. A rising cloud of dust appeared on the horizon motorcycles. Several of them, moving fast. Zara saw it first. "Father," she hissed, pointing. Malachi's heart lurched. The militants had found their trail again. The engines grew louder, snarling like metal predators. They were closing in quickly. "Run," the priest ordered. "Into the ravine. Now." The children bolted, legs trembling but fueled by terror. The ground sloped downward sharply, leading into a dry ravine filled with boulders and thick brush. The group scrambled inside just as the motorcycles crested the hill above. Gunfire cracked through the air. Bullets sparked against stones, sending debris flying. The children ducked and screamed, but kept moving. The ravine twisted like a labyrinth, giving them brief moments of cover. The priest shielded the rear, urging the slowest children forward. "Don't look back, keep going." Then over the roar of engines, another sound emerged. Water. Faint, but unmistakable. A river. Malachi felt it before he heard it clearly, a pull, like a quiet summons. "This way," he shouted, pointing toward the sound. They veered left, pushing through thick reeds. As they shoved through the final line of brush, the river revealed itself a wide, fast-moving current, glistening under the sun like liquid silver. The children gasped in awe. Some dropped to their knees from relief, but the relief lasted only seconds. The militants reached the edge of the ravine, guns raised. "There's no cover," Zara cried. "They'll kill us!" Another child panicked. The river rushed fiercely, impossible to cross safely. The militants were seconds away. Father Malachi looked from the water to the children, to the sky. "Mother," he whispered, "we need you." Wind swept across the river, rippling its surface. A sudden hush fell over everything. The air thickened with a strange stillness, a silence filled not with fear, but with presence. Then she appeared. Not in blinding brilliance this time, but in a soft radiance that hovered above the water, like mist shaped into a woman. Her blue mantle fluttered although there was no breeze. Her eyes, gentle, sorrowful, resolute, rested upon the children first, then upon the militants emerging from the ravine. Some of the children sobbed in relief. Others stared in stunned amazement. The militants, however, froze in terror. One dropped his rifle. Another stumbled backward, mumbling prayers in panic. The lady raised her hand slowly. The river responded. Light surged from beneath its surface like thousands of underwater stars rising at once. The current brightened, glowing brighter and brighter until the river looked like a ribbon of pure, fireless light. The children stared in disbelief. The lady's voice echoed not through the air, but through every heart present. Walk. Father Malachi felt something within him break fear, doubt, everything. He stepped into the river without hesitation, but instead of sinking, his foot found solid ground. A path. A glowing, shimmering path rising just below the surface, cutting across the river. "Children," he cried, voice trembling with awe. "Come, come now." The children rushed forward. Some hesitated, but as soon as they stepped onto the water, they too felt the firm, radiant path holding them. They crossed in a single, flowing line, small bodies illuminated by the river's miraculous light. Behind them, chaos erupted. The militants opened fire not at the children, but at the apparition. The bullets dissolved into sparks before reaching her. Panic overtook them. Some tried to follow across the river, but as soon as they stepped into the water, the glow dimmed and the current swallowed them instantly. Screams filled the air. Then the river roared upward, crashing back into its natural flow. Waves surged like a living wall, forcing the remaining militants to retreat in terror. On the far bank, the children collapsed into a trembling pile, crying, laughing, clinging to one another. The priest knelt, overwhelmed. Across the water, the lady remained for a moment longer. Her eyes full of compassion rested on them. Then she spoke again. "A place has been prepared. Walk east until you see the cross." The river calmed, the light faded, and gently she dissolved like dawn mist. The children lay in the shade of a large fig tree, recovering from the ordeal. Their clothes were torn, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. But something had changed within them, a spark of courage, of hope. Zara approached Father Malachi. "Where do we go now?" "East," he said, still gazing at the river with awe, "until we find the cross." "Do you think it's a real cross?" she asked. "Yes," he said with quiet certainty, "and I believe it is where our deliverance awaits." The smallest children curled up around him like fragile birds seeking warmth. Malachi draped his arms around them, grateful simply to feel them breathing. For the first time since their escape began, he allowed himself to believe they might survive. But even as they rested, a storm gathered on the horizon, black, heavy clouds rolling inward like a dark army. The priest watched them uneasily. Without warning, he felt it again, the whisper. Not of fear, but of warning. The journey was far from over. What awaited them eastward was not only salvation, but a final confrontation that would test every shred of faith they possessed. And beyond that confrontation, something greater still. He rose slowly. "Children," he called, voice steady. "We walk again. The mother is not finished with us yet." The children stood, stronger, braver, guided by a miracle they would remember for the rest of their lives. And together, they stepped into the unknown toward the cross, toward destiny, toward the final chapter of their deliverance. The storm advanced across the savannah like a living wall, black clouds rolling and twisting as if stirred by invisible hands. Thunder shook the air. The children instinctively huddled closer together, fear rippling through them. They had seen enough darkness in the past 2 days to know that storms in Nigeria could be merciless. Father Malachi stood at the front of the group, his cassock torn, his feet blistered, but his spirit anchored in something unbreakable. He watched the sky, listening not to the thunder, but to the quiet stirring within his heart. "Walk east until you see the cross." They obeyed. For hours, they crossed grassy hills and barren patches of dry earth. The storm followed them like a shadow, but did not strike. Lightning flared in the distance, illuminating the horizon in bright, jagged lines. Then Zara pointed suddenly. "There, look." A wooden structure stood atop a small rise ahead, a solitary cross, weathered, crooked, barely held together, planted firmly in the earth. No chapel, no village, no road nearby, just the cross, alone against the approaching storm. The children broke into desperate, exhausted cheers. "That's it," Father Malachi whispered. The place prepared. They climbed the hill, gathering around the cross. Some children touched the wood with trembling fingers, others knelt instinctively. But as they reached the top, voices erupted behind them. Engines, shouts, the militants. They had crossed farther downriver and tracked the group through the fields. Now they swarmed over the rise like a dark wave. Father Malachi pulled the children behind him. "Stay close. Do not be afraid." But the truth was cruel. He was unarmed, exhausted, and outnumbered. The children were too weak to run. The militants were closing in fast, rifles raised, fury burning in their eyes. One of the armed men shouted, "No mercy for traitors!" Thunder cracked violently overhead. The first militant lifted his gun. Then, a blinding flash of light tore across the sky. Not lightning, something purer, something white. Something that made the militants freeze mid-step, their weapons lowering instinctively. The wind stopped. The storm halted as if held back by an invisible force. And then she appeared. The lady. Not as mist, not as faint glow, but in full radiance. Her mantle streamed like flowing silk, illuminated by a soft golden light that bathed the entire hilltop. Her presence was so powerful, the air itself seemed to tremble. She stood beside the wooden cross, her hand resting upon it gently, as though calming an old friend. The children fell to their knees. Father Malachi felt tears spill from his eyes. The militants stared, some in fear, some in denial, others in awe. The lady lifted her gaze toward the armed men. Her eyes were not angry. They were sorrowful, so sorrowful that even the militants felt something inside them break. A second flash of light burst from the heavens, but this time it took form. Wings, hundreds of them. Not birds, not angels in human shape, but pure light, moving like waves in the sky encircling the hill, forming a glowing barrier between the children and the militants. The militants panicked. Some fled instantly, others dropped their weapons. Only a handful remained, paralyzed by fear. The lady turned to Father Malachi. Her voice echoed, gentle yet commanding. "Take them. Their lives are entrusted to you." He bowed his head, overwhelmed. "Where shall we go?" "Mother?" She touched the cross. Light flowed from her fingers into the wood, making it glow like amber. "A refuge waits beyond the valley. Follow the light." As she spoke, the cross burned brighter, its glow stretching like a path eastward, guiding the way. The militants saw the light and screamed, scrambling backward, unable to withstand the radiance. One dropped to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably, whispering prayers he had forgotten long ago. And then, just as suddenly as she appeared, the lady lifted her hand toward the sky. The storm dissolved instantly. The clouds opened, revealing a wide expanse of blue, calm, peaceful, impossibly clear. The lady looked at the children one last time. "You are not forgotten." Then her form dissolved first into shimmering particles of light, then into nothing at all. The world fell silent. The children cried freely, some from relief, others from gratitude, others simply because their hearts could not contain what they had witnessed. Father Malachi held them close, his own sobs mixing with theirs. Minutes passed. The militants who had fled were long gone. Only the cross remained still faintly glowing, still pointing toward safety. "Children," Father Malachi said softly, "we follow the light now." Their faces were weary, but something new burned in their eyes. Hope, true hope, not the fragile kind born from desperation, the enduring kind born from heaven. They walked down the hill, across the open plain, following the soft golden path that shimmered beneath their feet. It led them through tall grass, past abandoned fields, toward a line of distant trees, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, they saw it, a village. Small mud houses, smoke rising from cooking fires, women washing clothes by the river, men repairing fishing nets, a peaceful community untouched by the violence ravaging other regions. A group of villagers noticed them and rushed forward, shocked to see so many injured, starving children. They brought water, blankets, food, anything they could gather. One elderly woman placed her hands on Father Malachi's shoulders. "Father, where did you come from?" Malachi looked back over the savannah, toward the invisible cross, toward the path that had already begun fading. "From the mercy of God," he whispered. The woman nodded, not understanding but sensing truth. Within hours, the villagers had contacted the nearest mission. Aid workers and priests arrived with medical supplies, vehicles, and food. The children were examined, treated, comforted. Some were reunited with family within days. Others found new homes with relatives or Catholic missions. But none forgot. Not the darkness, not the fear, not the miracles, and especially not the lady who had walked with them. Months later, a new chapel was built on the hill where the cross stood. Pilgrims visited, candles burned day and night, and the children, now stronger, healed, and studying again, often returned to pray. Father Malachi, standing beside the reconstructed cross one quiet afternoon, whispered, "Mother, thank you for leading them home." The wind stirred gently, the leaves rustled, and somewhere in the breeze, soft, tender, unmistakable, came a whisper. "They were always mine." The priest smiled, the children laughed in the distance, and the savannah, once a place of terror and darkness, now shone under a sky of peace, its scars healed by the touch of a mother who never abandoned her children.